I believe that at the last meeting, my concerns regarding the protest held at the high school on the 18th of February were well voiced. When I concluded, I commented that I felt that as a parent, what I was asking for was an apology, not just to me personally, but more importantly to my son. Since that meeting, I want to put on record that I am happy to say that one teacher called my son into his office to personally apologize. He told my son that if he in any way said anything to cause him discomfort or voiced a political opinion that Dustin felt was inappropriate, he wanted to let him know that he was sorry. Those are the kind of stories that I was hoping would come from our meeting last week. But sadly, that has been an isolated event. After checking with my son this afternoon, I can say that this was the only teacher that has shown that kind of humility to my son. To further complicate matters, after reading the article in the Richland Observer, I was beyond disappointed once again with the administration of this school. After reading the article, the quotes from Principal Fitzloff and Superintendent Schultz, all I could think of is that there is no way that the people that wrote that article were in the same building that I was on that day. To say that the article gave a false view of the events of that day is an understatement. A direct quote from Ms. Fitzloff stated, "I am not aware of teachers sharing opinions with students. I am aware that during the morning while the protest was going on, you had a student in your office giving you names and details of what was taking place in the classrooms. And how is it that many students could quote their teacher's income and how this would affect them if they were not discussing it with their students? I just have to say that I am offended that in this article you are calling many of those students liars. How is it that my son knew that his teacher was at the protest had she not held up that newspaper bragging about being there? How did he know that she had protested the Vietnam War had she not been explaining her views about how the students needed to be blocking doorways and chanting like she did when she protested the war? Our teachers were very professional throughout, is another quote. Would these be the same teachers? I can give you two names in particular that actually encouraged their students so much that they escorted them to the protest. And what about the teacher that told the remaining students that chose to stay in class, "I don't want to be here, why do you? Why don't you just go to the protest?" Now that is very professional. Fitzloff also said students were required to make up any work that they missed in class. This would give the impression that classes were being held as usual. After talking to multiple students, they had teachers say that they weren't teaching because they were going to have to reteach on Monday. Rachel Schultz was told during the protest by one mom that personally witnessed a teacher telling the students not to worry because they would have no homework while she encouraged them to go to the protest. And let me once again mention that after she was told by this mom personally what she had just witnessed this teacher doing, the protest continued for another 2 hours. From what I could see, even though having this information, Ms. Schultz did not think that it was at least important enough to go ensure that this teacher understood that this was inappropriate behavior. Next, Fitzloff said student safety is number one priority. Throughout the entire protest, students were leaving with no permission and returning with food, if they returned at all. There were students checking themselves out, and many that just walked out altogether. I had parents that told me that while they were at Culver's, a group of high school students walked in during school hours. Is that what the administration deems as safety being the number one priority? Today, I was also told of a freshman calling her mom crying because she was overwhelmed, and kids calling parents from the bathrooms because they were afraid because they weren't supposed to be using their cell phones during school hours. Fitzloff also said students were aware of the expectations for their behavior was to be appropriate. After talking to students that were there at the protest, they informed me that no such discussion was ever had with the group, with the exception of instructions to stay in the commons or in class, which we now realize was not happening. I asked if an announcement of some sort was made informing everyone of what was to go on for the duration of the protest and giving instructions. They informed me that no one gave them any rules, once again, except for where they were to be. If at some point the students that initiated the protest were instructed of these rules, was it up to those students to inform the rest of the students that filled the commons that day? As I have said since the beginning, it is actions like this that led me to believe that the students had complete control that day, not the administration. Ms. Schultz, when I read the portion of the article where you stated that you were happy that the concerned parents were there, I just did not know what to say. You made it sound that it was your idea to have the small business owners share their stories. You know as well as I do, you did not want that to happen. If it weren't for the students demanding it, it would have never taken place. The so-called on-site field trip that the kids had would have went on with no actual information being shown to the students from either side. I had mentioned earlier about the teacher that took it upon himself to apologize to my son. As I stated that, to my knowledge, it hadn't happened in any other classrooms, but I hope that it has or that it does. Would you like to know my opinion as to why it hasn't? Because when we are in a position of authority, we lead by example. When reading this article, I have to wonder, Ms. Fitzloff and Ms. Schultz, is this the example that you wish to set for your staff? They were all here. They know what happened. And what about your students? Is this the example that you want to set for them? I handed the paper to my son, who is right over there, and I asked for his comment. He said, "Mom, that isn't at all what happened." How do you suggest that I handle that with him? Do I explain that it's okay to lie if it helps your employees, even if it's at the expense of other people? Because of statements like this in this article, and for standing up for my son that was left in a class with 3 students while the rest were choosing to spend their time in the commons, popping milk cartons and making vulgar signs about Walker, I have been put in very uncomfortable situations to defend why I believe that this administration did not have my son's best interest in mind when they made these decisions. But you want to know what bothers me the most. Because of this whole situation, it is now up to students like my son, the students that did what they were supposed to do when the parents sent them to school that day, be in class. These students are now put in the position to rat out their teachers. They are having to give names and explain the poor actions of their teachers. Like I said, I have talked to many students, but we have no way of knowing all the students that were put in difficult situations that day. I will close by saying, I am happy to say that I have had a dialogue with board members and a phone call this morning from Ms. Fitzloff, which I do believe was very constructive. I do respect her, but that doesn't mean that I agree her decision and the execution of the events of that day were good. What is done, and now it is up to you, the school board, to handle it. And I do hope that you handle it. Many people believe that you are just waiting for us to give up and let it blow over. I am afraid that is not going to happen. I believe there are teachers that need to be accountable for their actions, and I believe the administration needs to be held accountable as well. And I look forward to hearing at the next meeting on how you intend on doing that.